I'd be with my Marantz cassette player trying to dissect Yngwie Malmsteen Alcatraz licks at like 2, 3 in the morning. And it's 2, 3 in the morning. He'd come in and he'd say, "Oh, Jeff, it sounds great, man, but you think you could turn it down just a little bit?"
Welcome to Music Musing. Every once in a while, my brother George and I would have these conversations about music. Music is our passion, and it's a huge part of our lives, and we decided to share those conversations with you. So if you love music, sit back and enjoy this podcast. Welcome back to Music Musing. Got my brother on the line.
How we doing?
Good. We have a great show tonight. We have a guest on with us. I'm going to give him a quick rundown of his history, and then he'll give us a little insight to the early history real quick. Well, we have Jeff Young on the line. Jeff Young played guitar for So Far, So Good, So What by Megadeth in '88. He is a graduate of Musicians Institute. He wrote an article, Fingerprints for Guitar for the Practicing Musician, which I personally read a lot of in the 90s. Once he left Megadeth, he worked with Badi Assad on a project called Chameleon, where he did a lot of playing out with people like Joe Cocker, played Lilith Fair, Farm Aid. He had a really awesome solo album called Equilibrium in 2009. I'm sure he'll correct me on all this stuff if I'm off on anything. But recently he has been kind of what we do, mostly live stuff, but podcast-esque. It's called Music Without Boundaries. It's every Tuesday night live at 7-11 Eastern. And I'll kind of stop there and so I can verify. Jeff, have you actually been doing that almost 10 years?
8 years to be 8 years and counting, yeah.
You're creeping up on that. And he's actually working on a couple projects right now on YouTube, which are really cool if you get a chance to check them out. And we'll put all the links to everything in our show notes because there's going to be a lot of them. But he's been working on something called Slow Burn, where he's showing the creative process of creating a song from track versions, like the drum tracks and the bass tracks and the guitar tracks, the singing tracks. It's really cool. I think he's up to episode 3 at this point, but it's really cool. But Jeff Young, welcome to Music Musing.
Well, hello there, gentlemen. How are you doing? How's everybody doing out in listener land?
Fantastic.
Yes. And, you know, I said So Far, So Good, So What, Megadeth, because that was an influential album for me, but I am really digging your solo stuff. You actually talked to us about a week ago and kind of gave us the early insight to who you are. And if you don't mind sharing that, I think that's a really awesome story where you started, because we started in kind of the same area of Ohio. We were in a really small town a little bit south of Lyman. I think you were either north or south of us by about an hour in, where was it? It was, I wrote it down.
Kettering?
Centerville, Kettering, right around that area. It's both suburbs of Dayton, Ohio.
And from what I understand, you started playing music really early.
Yeah, in first grade, the music teacher brought around the orchestral instruments. So we're talking violins, violas, cello, upright bass, and trying to recruit kids into the orchestra. And I was all over the viola at first. Then I saw that cello and heard that big, deep cello across the way. And I started coveting that, and I went home to my mom. Mom, I got to switch to cello. And she was just not having it. I was doing my best to convince, and every day I'd go to school, hear that cello, and, you know, I love the viola, but, you know, in first grade you're so young and you get something stuck in your head, and I don't think she wanted to be the one carting that big cello all around Centerville, Kettering, Dayton, wherever she had to be running me for music lessons and performances and what have you. So I got frustrated and gave that up after first grade, and mostly was just listening to records and playing radio station in my bedroom. in second grade, but then here comes third grade, and the band teacher brings around all the trumpets, trombones, tubas, oboes, flutes, all the band instruments. I had to go for tenor sax. I was really in love with that instrument, and I stuck with that third grade through ninth grade, although ninth grade, and it was really cool. I had to switch to baritone sax. They lost the baritone sax girl that year. She moved, and they were stuck with that one. So in ninth grade, I had to learn how to read bass clef, because tenor sax would be in treble clef, music notation. So that was really educational, and that's really where I got the basis for, how to read music, play in time. The band instructors were picking out some cool stuff, and I was taking music theory courses and, making arrangements for strings and oboe for like the Beatles yesterday. So that's the earliest memories, and that takes me through ninth grade, and right around that time, I discovered guitar around that's 14 years old.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, my buddy had, he got it was one of those $40, $50 guitars you got at Sears or Kmart. And he played it for a month or two, and I went down to hang out with him, and I noticed it was in the back of his closet, right? And hey buddy, hey homie, what's up with the guitar? And he just looked at me and it's too damn hard to play. And he wasn't lying. He wasn't lying about that. But I had a Daisy BB gun that, I wasn't going to shoot any animal or do anything with that. And I said, hey, I'll trade you my Daisy BB gun for that guitar. And he was all over that.
Wow.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is a career.
Yeah, a blessing and a curse. Yeah, a blessing and a curse for sure.
So from that, I mean, again, George and I came from a really small town in Ohio, and kind of, we moved to Florida. It was a big, culture shock for us. It looked like where you had a little bit of more of a city than we had. But I mean, what's it like going from that into, taking classes at the Musicians Institute, and then being catapulted into like the world of a heavy metal band? Because from what I understand, it was like you were doing this, and then all of a sudden you're in the band and moving along, and what does it feel like going into a world like that from something so much smaller?
Small town boy makes good, right?
Kinda.
First off, where in Florida did you guys move? Because I lived in Sarasota on the Gulf Coast for a couple years. That's where my daughters are.
We moved to Tampa initially, and then we ended up in Land Lakes, was just a little bit north of Tampa. But it again, like you said, you're moving from something where there's a lot of cornfields, and cows, into a huge world, and it just seemed like you got catapulted into something through that whole thing, and so when you got kind of in that band, did that kind of light your fire for wanting to play guitar the way you are now with doing the solo stuff and working with a lot of different diverse people?
You mean when I got in Megadeth?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a bit of a gap between, leaving Dayton and when all that happened, but it actually wasn't that long. The Musicians Institute, Guitar Institute of Technology, for those folks who don't know about it, it's in Hollywood, California. When it was really hip, it was above the Hollywood Wax Museum at Hollywood and Highland. It was a very kind of occult underground school with some really amazing teachers like Tommy Tedesco of Wrecking Crew fame, and played on just so many records that we've all heard, known, and loved. Don Mock, Scott Henderson was a teacher. Frank Gambale was one of my teachers.
Yeah.
And it was just a beautiful time to attend that school. And I just found out about it via a column in Guitar Player magazine. And it was just kind of a profile of the school. It just it hooked me, and I researched it. I called him on the phone. I mean, there was no internet back then. This is 1984. You had to send an audition tape to get in, and I sent my audition tape, and there was a tuition, and basically at that time it was a 1-year vocational school, but now they have a full college program. And at that time it was just Guitar Institute of Technology, Bass Institute of Technology, and Percussion. Now they have vocal, keyboard, recording, guitar making, acting, music business. It's become it's moved across the street, and I ended up teaching there, which was a whole other experience.
Wow,
but
that's awesome.
I picked that school for 2 reasons, and at that time, it was a cool thing that I wouldn't at this day and age do the same thing. But in 1984, it put me in the perfect place at the perfect time, and I knew the school would be helpful. But the other side of the coin is that it put me in Hollywood, right there in the belly of the beast, and where I could make any connections. And if something was going to happen, if I could make something happen, it was going to be there or New York. Oddly enough, as I sit here talking to you guys from New York. But critical thing, and the difference, I think, for me, it's like, how did that happen and why is because I noticed there were some serious folks who really, really took the school serious, but a lot of kids, I think, came from rich families and kind of went out to Hollywood and thought they were just going to, live kind of like a college Animal House lifestyle, but, the rock star version of that in Hollywood, and going out drinking every night and partying and picking up chicks. And I was always more of kind of the Randy Rhoads, kind of just stay cool, practice your guitar. I didn't party. I didn't really ever go to bars. And I just played guitar morning, noon, and night. I remember keeping my roommate, and we're still buddies, and he was going to law school. He'd already graduated from GIT, but he was getting into law. And he'd be trying to sleep, and I'd be in the bedroom. He gave me the bedroom, and he had his bed out in the living room. I'd be with my Marantz cassette player trying to dissect Yngwie Malmsteen Alcatraz licks at like 2, 3 in the morning. And it's 2, 3 in the morning. He'd come in and he'd say, "Oh, Jeff, it sounds great, man, but you think you could turn it down just a little bit?" It's just like the walls are they're paper thin, in this Van Nuys apartment where we're living. And, he was such a great sport, and he's like a brother now. It's amazing that we've stayed friends all these years. He listens to the show every week, and I've told the story on the air, and we've laughed about it so many times. But I mean, just being that dedication, I didn't have a date the whole year. I was going a little crazy. When the Megadeth opportunity came along, cut to the chase, because a lot of stuff happened in between, but it was a year course. And it was a total of 4 years till the Megadeth thing happened. And to be honest, I remember going to a rodeo with my friend and driving home and telling them I'm about a weeks or a month or so away from just leaving Hollywood, leaving this area. The musicians, I was trying to get something more happening, like the Dregs, or like, what Steve Morse or Alan Holsworth, this kind of vibe. I wasn't really into the hair metal scene that was happening on the Strip, right?
Right.
So it was getting a little frustrating. And, I even mentioned to him, I was thinking about like, where can I go? New York, the UK, and I literally walked in to the house and my answering machine was blinking. And it was a message from Dave Mustaine.
Wow.
Some stuff I was already given, a lot of people know the story. I was given the guitarist they had hired to replace Chris Pohl, and I was his guitar teacher. And
wow.
Yeah, he had studied with me for a while, and we actually fell out of touch. And when he got the Megadeth gig, we got in touch again, and he said he'd pay me $50 an hour to help him figure out Chris Poland's solos, because he knew I have perfect pitch, and I pretty much taught myself how to play off records. off albums,
Right.
skipping school, or late nights or weekends, just putting on the record, and because there was no YouTube or instructional videos, hot licks videos. There was no teachers in my town that could play Ole John Roth licks or Jeff Watson solo and Don't Tell Me You Love Me or Eruption or Spanish Fly or Randy Rhoads. So you had to, and I'm sure so many kids were doing the exact same thing, probably at the exact same times in their bedrooms all across the country and across the planet. And of course, we all know and love many of them right now. And like Paul Gilbert, one state apart. He was in Pennsylvania, and he was in my second half of my GIT year was the first half of his year.
Wow.
So I remember the first day he was at school, we were just hanging out in the big performance room, and me and him and my 4 or 5 other guys sitting around, and he and I were comparing how we both figured out how to play Spanish Fly.
Wow.
Van Halen 2, and just fun stuff like that. So it was a great experience, but I was really frustrated in LA. There was a lot of people into cocaine, and I never drank or any of that stuff. So I was really serious about it, and I wanted to make a serious go of this. And it was just so strange, telling my buddy, and of all places, you're on your way home from a rodeo, which is kind of what living in Hollywood's like. So I ended up, that phone call came, and when I pushed the message, I had been giving some lessons for some days down at the recording studio, the infamous Music Grinder, which I was really stoked. I found out Alan Holsworth did his Metal Fatigue album there, and I never knew that. So now I'm like totally stoked, but then a little bummed because I know I could have got better guitar tones in that studio than what I was allowed to have on that record. But that's a story for another day, and maybe my autobiography. But, so there was a message in short. Dave asked, "Can you come down to the Music Grinder tomorrow at X o'clock? I want to talk to you about something." I pretty much knew at that time because I think I'd gone over to Dave Mustaine and Dave Elfson shared apartment in Silver Lake, California, just outskirts of Hollywood. And I think what the clincher was, I think I'd gone over there the night before that or a couple nights before that. And Dave wasn't even out he was hanging in the bedroom, but Elfson and Chuck were there, and their assistant, and Gadget, their guitar tech, Dave Friedman, their kind of gopher. And I put on Peace Sells. I had my little cassette player there and put it on, and I figured out, they gave me the Peace Sells, and I figured out Chris Poland's solo to Wake Up Dead, and like, 10 minutes and like 20 minutes I was playing it perfectly, and like Chuck's eyes were popping out of his head. He ran in the bedroom, and I left, and I didn't think much about it because I was helping. Jay had said, "I'll pay you $50 to help me figure out Chris Poland solos and help me write solos for the new album," which I didn't know what it was going to be called or anything of the sort. So there's the message, and I went down to the Music Grinder the next day, and we walked up and down the street. He wrote in his book that I had really short pants on, just a really emasculating tale about, but I was wearing like the long surfer pants, the Anthrax kind of deck pants that you'd surf with down to your knees. I did have Docksiders on, so he was right on that. And so they only wore those high tops, the high tops and the tight jeans, tight stretch jeans, or nothing, and T-shirts. But
I just gonna say, I think he's still in that motif.
Something he was like, you'll have to get you to dress like Megadeth or whatever. But hey, here's a cassette. Here's a cassette tape of a song, which turned out to be In My Darkest Hour. And it wasn't even the whole song. Wow. There was no vocals. It was just like a lead up to where my solo begins, which is after the "You Just Laughed, haha, bitch," blah, 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 and right. So I had maybe like 20 seconds to kind of get the groove of what it was, and then, okay, start here. Okay, end here. and the galloping part goes on, and we'll see you tomorrow. You know, leading and kind of coming full circle what I was saying about, you know, not going out and drinking or even dating, hanging out. Success, it's a cliche because it's true that success is when luck and preparation intersect. And because I was playing so much, I remember I was really copping a lot of stuff off the Gary Moore Corridors of Power and the what's his other one with Murder in the Skies? Why am I blanking on the name of that? Amazing, the follow-up Killer Gary Moore album, his heaviest one. But in Holsworth, and so my chops were really up, you know.
Right.
And it's just I was ready. So I went home and I listened to that tape, and I just kind of improv some changes. Like I gave myself a couple different alternatives, like try this if this works, cool if this, try this if it doesn't. I went in the next day and just improv the solo that you hear. There was no rehearsals with the band or, you know, like sitting down
You were just
or getting
laying
used
tracks
to
over
the
top of
album or
something?
knowing what the direction or the vibe or the frequency of the band was. It was just like, you know, here, play this. And I remember Paul Lanny, which he also produced a really cool album for the band Enough's Enough called Strength, which I really love, and I love the production. I'm not real hip with the sound of how So Far So Good So What turned out overall. You know, I think it could be a lot better. Again, that's another story, but each day, I remember Paul Lanny, I mean, he did Enough's Enough, but he had just done Steve Vai. The previous album before Megadeth was Disturbing the Peace, right? When Steve Vai replaced Yngwie and Alcatraz. And so I was kind of shy, and the mixing board was there, and I was in the studio, and I literally turned around to everyone with my back to the mixing board and the producer and the people who were in the room, and I was almost kissing the back wall of the room. I was like, I just wanted to kind of go in my own world, and I played the solo, and he was jumping around saying, that's great. I haven't had this much fun since I worked with Steve Vai on the Alcatraz album. And so I felt good about it, and everyone was cool and high-fiving each other. And so I just did one solo that night. You know, I did a couple takes, and I left, and they called me and said, hey, can you come back? And they gave me, I think, Hook and Mouth, that solo section. So I had already kind of been trying, that was the first thing I was trying to write that for Jay. I wanted something kind of like Flight of the Bumblebee, you know, kind of Michael Schenker-esque, you know, a little bit classical sounding.
Yeah,
something
that's one of my favorite galloping rhythms through any song, man. I love that.
I thought it would be easy to play, but in the end, it's actually really, really hard to play. By the time I got done with it, for a variety of reasons, and I actually still use that, like, you know, as one of my warm-ups, and I play that often just to keep my chops up. So that's a good one. And I've already done Set the World Afire transcription for, you know, patrons and supporters, and I'm about to release the video workshop lesson. It's kind of a behind the music where I talk about the Megadeth and the song In My Darkest Hour, and I teach how to play the solo and some other parts of the song, some of the key parts of the song. And then I'll probably do Hook and Mouth. People seem to like that, so I get a lot of feedback on. So that was the process. It was literally each day. Like, I think I got Hook and Mouth done pretty quick the next day. So they might have, I think they said, here, listen to this. And I went in the other room, and I think I just messed around with Liar. And then I just went in and improv that. And then 502 and just on from there and then I ended up playing rhythms on most of the stuff and doing some acoustic guitars, like the beginning of Mary Jane, which I think is my favorite thing off the record.
The acoustic really beginning of that is really nice.
So I did that on 6-string and 12-string, I think. So that was that. And then literally, I mean, because they were on a deadline, like there was, again, no rehearsal. They had a gig. I think the first gig, we literally had to like fly over and do, well, I think they had a California tour booked first, and we did like a quick, they wanted to make sure I could cut it live, and then we had to fly over to the UK and do this big festival headlining with Testament and Overkill and some other band, Corrosion of Conformity. I forget who else was on the bill, but So it was literally like out of the frying pan and into the fire. And then the tour started, and
obviously that's kind of shaped who you started with. But a lot of musicians from that time, and a lot of metal players, not a lot, some of the metal players, kind of like what you've done, you've kind of moved to a more solo jazz sound. Like I know Alex Skolnick from Testament had actually done that as well. And so what's that? What makes that jump for you? How do you get that feeling of, I really, this is okay, but I really love to play jazz. I really love to do the solo stuff. And, you did that project with Badi Assad with Chameleon, and, what that seems to be what you love to do. And in what little bit we've talked to you, it kind of feels like that's exactly what you love to do. So what makes that jump for you? What makes you get out of that, that limelight and that big high end and kind of jump into that feeling more?
To be honest, I was always what I was doing on the Megadeth album was kind of copping the vibe up. If you listen to Paco de Lucia, it's a lot of the same modes, flamenco-esque scales, harmonic minor, Phrygian dominant, diminished stuff, and that I heard.
So that was
album.
more
I
what
heard
you
the
wanted
trio
to do
with
anyways.
Paco and John McLaughlin and Al Di Meola when I was 16. So I was just trying to do kind of that vibe. I was really into flamenco and all that when I was 16.
awesome.
So I was trying to do that on electric guitar. And like, for example, if you go listen to the end of Set the World Afire, that E
Okay.
to F half step progression, E to F half step, it's the same as the E to F half step progression in flamenco, which you play the harmonic minor, the Phrygian dominant scale over it, and it's just a little bit different rhythm. The only difference is you're one guy's blasting it through a Marshall
Through a
stack.
high watt distorted Marshall.
Yeah, and the other guy's blasting it, through with nylon strings, and his flesh and nails on wood and nylon, I know Chris Poland, likewise, that's what gave those early Megadeth albums, especially Peace Sells, that sound, and why you noticed that it was gone a little bit on So Far So Good So What, and got farther and farther away from the jazz fusion influence that was there from the beginning, because Chris Poland and Gar Samuelson were the ones that brought that, because they were huge into Mahavishnu Orchestra, Jeff Beck, all the fusion players, Miles Davis, he was into Jan Hammer, Chris Poland. So Alex Skolnick, I'm sure maybe he would tell you a similar story, that likewise he was also, always very into it. Testament opened for Megadeth on a lot of the dates that we did on that tour. So Alex and I always ended up hanging out with each other and guitar geeking out. So...
I got to say, Jeff, you're actually blowing my mind right now. I think my brother and I were talking about this before we started talking too, that, maybe I was thinking about the whole metal genre and feel kind of the wrong way. And maybe I'm also thinking about this the wrong way. Maybe I'm thinking that, the jazz was kind of what you went to, or, soloing. And one of your tracks, Monsoon, and I'll post a link to it. I kind of
brought it to metal. It's what we all brought to metal. And this is the thing, the best way I can explain it, the best way I've ever heard it explained was by Andy Summers of the Police. When someone asked him the same question, the Police are a way huger band than Megadeth, but they asked him, why did you transition away from doing this more pop-friendly stuff? And he's doing very jazz-oriented stuff. His new album is cool. I play it on Music Without Boundaries all the time. All the different projects he's done, and Stuart Copeland likewise. Look at the diversity that he's done and engaged in. And his answer was just brilliant. He said, and it's just as you go through and progress on an instrument, for example, blues, and hopefully most people get that blues foundation. But once you can play the blues and you can play it well, you can play the blues, right? And then you're searching for something else in metal, and hard rock, and there is some very complex stuff to play, some very virtuosic players. but as you get to a higher level of musicianship, the virtuosity mostly is in the lead guitar part of it, at least for a guitar player. The rhythm stuff, to be honest, it's not that hard to play, so there's not really that challenge. So you're just looking for more diverse challenges. And to be honest, and maybe tie another brilliant quote in from Eric Clapton that I heard, and that's kind of why for 10 years I didn't play through an amp very much or with a pick or an electric guitar that much. I was more focused on classic nylon string guitar. Some people call it a classical guitar, or the flamenco guitar, which is also nylon string, or a steel string acoustic 12 string. I was branching more into that. I read, and I remember it was while I was going to GIT. It was when one of these guitar magazines, Eric Clapton said, "Hey, you want to find out if a cat can really play guitar? Like really? Blow doors down and turn off his amp and take away the electric, unplug that electric guitar and hand him an acoustic, and you'll soon see what time it is," right?
That's
Just
awesome.
to be honest, because it's the hardest guitar to play is flamenco. The flamenco guitarists in Spain would annihilate any American guitar players, and I'm sorry for any guitar players that want to get offended by that, but you go listen to some players like Tomatito and Vicente Amigo, and you'll feel a whole new way about it. Or no, check out the brothers Asagi, Sergio Onodai Asaj on the classical guitar side. I'll give you a couple videos to share in the link. I forgot to send you that link of the brothers, but I really want you to see that. So, that's what led me into that. And because the thing is with finger style guitar and flamenco and you can play counterpoint, which means you can get your thumb going and playing a bass line. You can do melodies, so you're getting an actual, and you can beat on the guitar and almost get like a one-man band going right there on that acoustic guitar, which it's just a whole different frequency. And it's not that one's better than the other. Right now I've pretty much switched back and I'm doing mostly electric, but on the new song, there'll be some acoustic on Slow Burn. You can hear some acoustic guitar on Monsoon. I think I'm more into trying to blending and finding a good balance, a good equilibrium of the electric and acoustic. But the challenge for me, and I think a lot of players, is just more complex harmonic music. The rhythms are more intricate. The harmonies in the music. I mean, face it, most of the hard rock, metal, and radio stuff, it's in 4/4 time, and it's once you got it, you got it, and we can do that. And if I need to do that, I've gone out and jammed in my darkest hour for charity events, or people wanted to do the song for this or that, and it's no big deal. And Steve Morse said it very well. Look at what he's done in his career and how many different styles, and why he got voted, in Guitar Player magazine readers poll best overall guitar player for so many years. He was a guest on my show, just such a great player. Gave us a 13-minute beautiful interview at the NAMM show, and just the kind of interview and the kind of person that, whether you're a musician or not, you just learn something from meeting this man and being close to him. And he said it very well that he's gone from Deep Purple to the Dregs, Kansas, acoustic style. He does classical style stuff, country, and it's all very easy. He said, for me to go from style to style, it's just a little bit of adopting your technique here or there. And if you're playing guitar this long, you might as well learn all these different styles. And for me, it's just been a means. Because I think that all the new music, the best fresh new music, is coming from people merging like blues with metal, or flamenco with metal, or like what Queen did. They brought opera into rock.
Oh yeah.
Any kind of fusion, like what I did on the Brazilian project that I did for Verve Polygram, was mixing Brazilian music and flamenco and all the stuff I grew up on, like Yes. I mean, there's so much I mean, if you listen
Absolutely.
to some of Steve Howe's stuff, very flamenco stuff that he did. And
Yeah,
so
I mean, that's what I'm going to end up doing is going back and
so
visiting that stuff again.
yeah, the crossover is so there, and a lot of these great, you think of Jethro Tull, yes, even Van Halen, he had a really good blend of classical and blues in his style, if you really
Yeah, he
think
did.
about it. Even on Van Halen
Yeah,
2, What is Spanish Fly? I mean, it's a flamenco-esque shred on an Ovation steel string that he ripped the steel strings and put some nylon strings on there, and it ruined the guitar, but because you're not supposed to put nylon strings on a steel string guitar, but he got that amazing piece. So you see,
Even like,
and
go ahead.
Randy Rhoads, another one, merging the
Yeah.
classical, and then Yngwie brought the classical. So I think all of us I've never listened to just one style of music. I've always loved all styles, so you're naturally going to want to incorporate that. I do it in the songs I play, and I do the same thing on my radio show. I mean, my mantra could be I could just wear a T-shirt, music without boundaries, put that on my business card.
That's actually words to live life by in my world.
Well, but I think, one of the things I love about the discussion we're having tonight, and I really appreciate you letting us behind the curtain and seeing, where things were created and stuff. But your slow burn series intrigues me a lot. So what kind of, I love the whole thing. What kind of gave you that idea to do that slow burn series and put that kind of open the curtain so we could see behind the scenes?
Poverty.
Oh, and by the way, we'll link to everything where you can donate and help him out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the internet, and we don't have enough time to really just go into the whole, sordid story of how complex it is for musicians to make money right now, because there's YouTube and most people have uploaded our stuff somewhere online. So, we're working every day, and I mean, even the folks that work, even the cat cleaning up after the elephant in the circus is getting paid for a day's work, right?
Right.
But not all musicians. So each musician is having to find his or her own way into this new uncharted territory of what is left of the music business and what it's going to become. So I'm just trying to create my own unique path. There's no rule book or guidelines for any of us to follow, but I always, as a kid, and we've kind of talked about it tonight, we talk about it all the time on my show. Pete talks about it on Sea of Tranquility. We love music. We love to talk about music. I just got a new turntable for the studio for the show, and we spin a lot of vinyl on the show, and just to appreciate looking at a big album where you can, read the credits, where it was recorded, all who played on what. I always loved that as a kid, and I would always run home and read all that stuff. And since CDs have come out, everything's gotten so small, and people burn it into their their iPhone or their iTunes or their laptop, and they never, look at the CD jacket ever again. They toss it. And and I think we've got to reconnect with the people, and I think people are interested in seeing. Just think of the new Queen movie, how interesting it is when you see them in the studio creating those things, and they're all excited, and you get to see that. So, what a
really good point.
Yeah. So and why should people care? There's so many songs out there. People are making music all different ways, all different kinds of music. I'm just trying to find an interesting way to bring people in to each song. So we're doing this with each song where it's a behind the music, inside the song, and deep in the recording studio, where you can see the evolution of a song from the seed as it layers and how it changes and morphs. And, some songs maybe stay similar to how they started. Other songs take on a whole new life and change by the time that they're released. But I just want to let, the listener and, my follows on social media, and it gives people, you're part of making the album if you're going to contribute. And I think everyone should find, if it's not Jeff Young, find a band or an artist. It could be a painter It could be any kind of creative. You need to find 2 or 3. If music is your passion, film, support a filmmaker. We need to support real creativity, not manufactured Hollywood bullshit creativity.
Agreed,
right?
man.
That has
You're
no
like totally
imagination.
That's a huge quote right there, because you're speaking to the music lovers. Because guys like Craig and I, when we listen to music, we want to read the album cover. We want to know who's playing what. We want to learn that guy. We want to know. We want to talk to guys like Jeff Young that have been there, done that, and are continuing to do it and pushing new boundaries in an uncharted territory. Because we still want to know what it takes to get that done. And sometimes the ugly truth is it takes money to get that done.
It takes money. And if you don't want to, sell your soul, in Hollywood,
absolutely.
Which most people, whether you're in acting, music, modeling, any of this stuff, I'm just telling you, it ain't pretty. And there's a reason I'm doing it 100% pirate and indie, If I could do it the other way, I'd be doing it the other way. If it was in any way sane to do it that way, but it's literally not sane to do it that way. So, again, the slow burn, behind the music, inside the song, and deep in the recording studio video series is just a way to let people follow along in the journey. So, part 1, I started it out in the slideshow I put together myself, and it's just pictures to give you a vibe. Reaching out to maybe different audiences of interest, pictures that are going to catch your eye and kind of help tell, because it's an instrumental tune, but yet a picture says 1,000 words. So if you guys have watched parts 1, 2, and 3, you kind of see how it's evolving. Part 1 is Jeff Bowder's drums and James Lomenzo's bass part. And then there was a long space between that and that was done 2-inch to analog tape, live in the studio, no Pro Tools. So it sounds old school. Everything I'm doing, and again, that's more expensive. It's hard to find a studio. Right now I'm here on the East Coast trying to source a studio to back up all these master tapes, 2-inch master tapes that, they don't just sit there in pristine condition. They demagnetize, and you even have to put them in an oven and bake them if they sit too long. So it's a whole art to recording to 2-inch, and no one wants to deal with it anymore because they all want to do it in digital. But I care about you guys, and I know that I know for a fact the reason people don't listen to music like they used to, and I mean really listen, and don't care about music the way they really used to, because there's still great music being made. And 1, it's because it's being made so hard to find, but 2, we're analog creatures, humans. And we're meant to input analog intel and information, and analog, it resonated with us. We're not digital creatures, and all this digital noise from cell phones to the Wi-Fi, the 5G, don't get me started. It's splintering our spirits on the energetic level. It's not compatible, our analog nature of the humans we are, with digital music. So I think people they don't resonate with it. It sounds sterile. It's not warm. So, we're going through that extra effort. And people get to see that whole process. And then part 2, I was out in Colorado, and I happened to find a great studio out there and did some clean guitar, just the basic clean guitar that runs through the song. And then I sent it to a guitar student of mine from GIT. See, and this is how this stuff all happens, just naturally and organically, if you just allow it to unfold this way. One of my guitar students was in one of his bands he played in, while he was my student and beyond when he graduated. I always remembered he had this cute violinist, and they were playing kind of quirky music with world influences. Well, she ended up getting the gig with Shania Twain as her viola player, and she learned how to play pedal steel to boot. So I called him and I recruited her. Because the last song, Monsoon, which we didn't talk about, has cello, which if we go back to the beginning of our talk in the beginning of my musical evolution. I wanted to play cello so bad, and Monsoon has a lot of gypsy influences, so the cello is cool. And Tina Guo was on my show when she was in Cirque du Soleil, the Michael Jackson Immortal World Tour, and I coaxed her into playing on that track. So now Slow Burn is the follow-up. I wanted to do something that was still connected, but yet different. And I figured, why not go full circle? Okay, I could, instead of cello this time, let's go back to the first instrument I ever played. And I sure can't play it anymore because I told you I gave up. But I found someone who plays it beautifully. And she plays pedal steel, and I really love what she's done. You guys have heard it. So we put out part 3. She did the pedal steel tracks, and those are what you hear in the video is just 2 of her takes. She did 5 takes, so that means what you hear in the videos is not necessarily what's going to end up on the final version. And there's 5 takes, and I haven't even gone through all of her takes yet to see everything that's there. And I'll go through and pick out all the master magic parts that really fit with the next part. And the next part, you guys will be seeing part 4 soon to be released. And the Slow Burn video series will be my solos. And I got to do some there's a lot of heavy guitars that, kind of almost like Alice in Chains' Dirt era vibe in the chorus and parts. And if you kind of listen to it, you can hear there's a little bit of that vibe in there with the drop D tuning. And so I'll add some acoustic guitars and the dirty rhythms and all the solos, and that'll be in part 4. Part 5 will be Andrea. Her name's Andrea Vid. I want to mention her name. The players in James Lomenzo from Megadeth and White Lion and Black Label Society and Pride and Glory, and now out on tour with John Fogerty is on bass on this track. And Jeff Bowders, who played most notably with Paul Gilbert on many of his albums and tours and all of his recent guitar retreats that Paul Gilbert does. Jeff is his drummer. He also plays with a great buddy of mine, Justin Derrico. I think we talked already in the pre-interview. He plays guitar with Pink, and many listeners may have seen him shredding in that really killer YouTube live video of Pink doing Zeppelin's Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You with blonde curly hair guitar player. That's my buddy. He also taught at GIT when I was teaching there, and he's really cool. And Jeff plays with some drums with him. So great players on the track. Just basically solos, some extra guitar overdubs, her viola, which I just think is really cool, and I'm excited to have that instrument that eluded me on one of my tracks. And then the next part of the video series will be the mix, and then we'll release it, hoping to do a music video. And then I'm going to do the same thing with each song off the instrumental album, one at a time, just release it as we go, as we can, because that's kind of the new music business model right now. And it is. That way you're making each song, because you give people right now, this day and age, an album. It doesn't matter how good it is. We've got bands like Aerosmith and Fleetwood Mac, and people saying, why should we bother recording a new album? People aren't going to buy it, right?
Yeah.
So, and if you give them at this day and age, because the attention span's so short.
True.
Maybe too many songs. But if you make each song, give them one song at a time and make that song killer.
And I think you're talking my brother's language.
And really make that more of an experience. As you got to make each song this day and age as much of an experience as a full album was, even for people to care about it. And then you give each song, you could milk one song for a year, and go talk to someone anywhere that's a music lover and they still haven't heard your music. So
you touched on something a few minutes ago, and I didn't want to let that get away, but it's kind of relates to what you just said. It feels like what you're doing with that is kind of like the liner notes for this generation. Like when we bought albums, we flipped open that either the album or the cassette and flipped all, that little piece of paper open, and there were liner notes in there. There were stories about the songs, even the words of the songs, and then there were some stories or some thank yous to somebody. And that's what it feels like you're doing for this generation is a liner notes. That's what Slow Burn feels like to me, is you're giving the liner notes of this song to us as the people who care about music.
And that I really enjoy.
Especially
I
if
appreciate
people are
that.
going to be sponsoring you, and
Yeah.
they're basically an executive producer on the album, and you should keep them in the loop.
Exactly.
I mean, there's one thing for being said, like Tool, look how mysterious they are. Like, when the thing it's been, finally their album's dropping, it's like, Guns
Yeah.
N' Roses with Chinese Democracy. It's by that point, people don't care anymore, but,
We have an entire podcast where I made my brother listen to that album and review it for me.
which
Chinese
one?
democracy he's talking about.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of it? I mean, I'm a big Buckethead fan, but not big fans of that
was
record.
painful.
Huh?
Yeah, that was painful.
Yeah, so it's so I mean, and look, all that secrecy, and look what the album did. So again, everyone's, and I'm just being honest, we're all out of sorts. We feel a little bit uncoordinated in a business. We just want to. I just want to make music, and I'm sure so many musicians feel like me. In a word, I just want to. And cut to the quick, I'm a hopeless romantic when it comes to music. I'm old school. You've heard it. We're doing everything 2-inch and trying to keep it real. On my next tracks, I got Rick Firabachi, Stevie Wonder's bass player. He played with Billy Cobb and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I got Shane Gallus, who's recorded with Schenker and Yngwie, and we're trying to bring the best to people. But we need some help. And I know, like, for me, it's taken so much longer. Before, I was funding everything myself because I had the means and I had the money. But, for some of us, that money runs out at a certain point. We just can't give the music away for free anymore. So we're all just trying to find our way. I believe, like Bob Marley, music is medicine. Music can heal. I mean, music brings people together. We've toured the world and we've seen people of diverse languages singing lyrics that they don't even understand that language, but they can sing those lyrics perfectly. And you see how everything, all the differences, all the false constructs of race and sex and all these things just melt away. And when people are at a concert, it's we are one. Right?
100%, man.
Yeah, and that's the only reason to do it at this point, because it's for sure not money or fame or any of the stuff that. And I didn't even want any of that when I was that young green kid driving out to California to go to GIT from Dayton, Ohio. I just wanted to be like, a Jeff Beck or a Steve Morse, an Alan Holdsworth. I actually got to see Alan Holdsworth play in my hometown the night before I moved to California. He played the jazz club in Dayton, Jilly's, and I took my mom and dad because they were scared. They saw me with Kiss album covers, and they were scared shitless to let their kid go out to Hollywood, California. I mean, so I wanted them to see a great player like Alan Holdsworth because he and Eddie Van Halen jammed at MI together. There's videos all over YouTube if you want to check it out. And I said, I want to go to this school, because great players like this come to the school and they give workshops and they teach, and it'll put me in California. And I went up to Holdsworth after the show, and I kind of told him that I was moving to California to go to GIT pretty much because I knew he played there with Van Halen and he was my big influence. And he was out there, and that kind of inspired me to do it. And I think he looked at me like, I don't know if I want that on my conscience, young man.
I don't want to be blamed for that, sort of.
Yeah. But
that's a perfect tie-up to our conversation. I mean, you really brought a full circle around to where you started and kind of where you've ended up at recently. And we're going to put all the links in the show notes, but I just want to say thank you. I mean, you've really kind of changed how I look at music a little bit myself from my end. I think I've kind of, like you said, I've lived in an analog world for so long. This digital world's kind of gotten a little tiring for me. I want to get back to that analog feel. We are going to put links to everything that you've got out there. One of the main things, though, is we'll put a link to where if somebody wants to help support you on this Slow Burn series, they can support you. And the other one is the Music Without Boundaries, which again, you've been doing it for about 8 years, and I've just started scratching the surface on the episodes, but listening to you talk and you and Pete Pardo and the guests you have is amazing, and I really appreciate what you're doing for the music industry out there. And I also appreciate you coming and sitting and talking with us for a little bit. I really do.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you so much for saying that. Your words aren't lost on me. I mean, sitting here, being able to do music and with the cool people, and the fact you guys dig it and listen to it, it means the world. I'm just feeling nothing but gratitude at this stage of the game. And I'm on the East Coast. It's treating me well over here. And so far, so good, so what? So, as they say on the East Coast. So, yeah, I mean, I really appreciate it. If you guys want to check out the whole video series for Slow Burn is on my YouTube channel. It's at youtube.com/JeffYoungTube. I'm sure they'll put some other links in the notes for you if you want to find some of my other stuff. The radio shows every Tuesday night, and I really appreciate the chance to chat with you guys, and it's just cool we came all from Ohio and music lovers. And you see, I mean, I'm just the same cat that grew up in Dayton, and I've tried to just stay that way. And that's the only way, I think, to do music and not lose either your soul or your mind or both.
Agreed.
So I'm glad people are listening, and the radio show's there. Hopefully, so people can hear music that they may never get a chance to hear anywhere else ever in their lives, because we play deep cuts and really random, off the beaten path stuff. So I think that's fun for folks to discover the new music. I hope to get some new music out to you real soon. I'm hoping Slow Burn, just to close it up, I hope Slow Burn will be out within a month or less, if I can make that happen. So stay tuned for that.
Thanks again, Jeff. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Have a good one.
We want to talk to you about music, so reach out to us at musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com.
You can also find us on most social media sites by searching Music Musing or George or Craig Seibert, SYBERT.
And you can also find us on Twitter as musicmusing_ as well.
Thank you for listening to this Music Musing podcast.